Good morning, everybody. We are in the soup unit, so we're going to be making some New England clam chowder. So what is soup? Hot soup is a liquid in which it has some ingredients in it, okay, and it is cooked in a liquid and it creates different textures, okay, and different flavors as well. So we're going to start by adding our potatoes to our pot. So I have already cut these in cubes, and remember, you want to make sure that your potatoes, it doesn't matter what size you cut them, what matters is that it's consistent, okay? So I'm gonna add my potatoes to the pot. I'm gonna add my celery, and I'm adding the celery with the potatoes because I find celery takes forever to cook. So I could add water, or you could add chicken broth, but we're making a clam chowder. You don't want to add chicken flavor, so I always add some clam broth, okay? I happen to prefer this Snow brand of clam juice. Now you want to add enough liquid so the potatoes are covered by at least, I would say, an inch. So I'm just going to add a little bit more water to the pot. Okay. Now, the clam broth, if you look at the ingredients, okay, it says clam juice, water, extract of clams, and salt. Because the second ingredient is salt, I'm actually not going to add any salt to my potatoes, okay? Typically when you boil potatoes, you want to make sure water is salted before you add your potatoes. And I'm going to cover that. And the potatoes are going to take about, depending on the potato, I would say anywhere between 12 minutes to maybe even 20 minutes. We're making New England clam chowder, so what does that mean? That is a chowder that is thickened with a roux. Okay, now a roux is fat. In this case, we're going to be using some butter and some flour. Now, it should be equal amounts by weight. So if one stick of butter is 4 ounces and I cut it in half, that means I'm using 2 ounces of butter. I'm also using a half cup of flour. So if your 1 cup of flour weighs 4 ounces and you want to make sure it equals the same amount of butter, I'm only going to use half a cup, which is 2 ounces of flour. So I have 2 ounces of flour and 2 ounces of fat. And that's my thickener. So with New England clam chowder, it is typically thickened, one, with the potatoes, because that also has starch, but with the roux. So I'm gonna take my fat and my flour, I'm gonna put it into the pot on like medium heat, okay. And I'm going to saute my onion in with that flour. And I'm actually going to add the leftover little bit of onion in with the potato because that's fine. So that's going to slowly just kind of saute. And once you add your flour, you're going to cook it until it kind of smells nutty, and that's called the blonde stage. Then you're going to add your liquids. When you're adding liquids, if your roux is hot, your liquids that you're adding should be cold. If you start with a cold roux, then your liquid should be hot. Okay, the liquid that we're going to use is lactose-free milk. Why? Well, me and dairy don't really get along. So could you use heavy cream? Absolutely. Could you use regular milk? Absolutely. Unfortunately, I can't digest the milk sugar in milk, which is lactose, and it's lactose free because it has the enzyme lactase in it, which helps me digest this dairy product. Okay. So I'm noticing I'm hearing some sounds. I'm just going to give that a little stir. So going back to the different types of chowder, the New England Clam Chowder is usually thickened with cream. You have a Manhattan style chowder, and that has a tomato base, and then there's also the Rhode Island style chowder, and that is more broth based. Okay, so I'm starting to smell like the sweetness of the onions. They're getting happy. I'm gonna add my flour. Now this should be the consistency of, I would say, like some wet sand. Now, if I find that my consistency is a little dry, what you can do is you could add more fat in the form of butter. Okay, you could also add a little bit of olive oil. Okay, now some people prefer bacon in their clam chowder, and instead of the butter, like I said, I could use the bacon drippings. But I'm trying to go as low fat as I possibly can because you really want to eat healthy. Okay, so this is the consistency I'm kind of looking for. It could be a little bit more liquidy, but that's fine. I don't want to add any more fat if I don't have to. So I'm gonna stir it, and so believe it or not, soup actually goes back like 6,000 years. We've been eating soup, and the word soup actually comes from the word sop, because, okay, bread was actually sopped into the dish and soaked. Okay, so that's where the origins of that from. And believe it or not, we actually have the Native Americans to thank for clams. They've been eating clams in this area for hundreds and hundreds of years, and even the ingredient of potato originated from Native Americans as well. All right, now this is starting to smell a little nuttier. There's not that much color, but that's okay. So I'm gonna lower my heat, because remember, I have my hot roux. Okay, and I'm gonna add my cold liquid. So what's gonna happen? Gelatinization is gonna happen. So when a liquid is heated, the starches absorb the water and swell, all right? And then those granules burst and the starch thickens, and that gelatinization of the starches really begin at around 150 degrees. So you wanna make sure that your roux, once you add your liquid, is gonna reach the boiling point. Now, the clams, you could use cooked clams, but I find canned clams are just easiest. And I'm actually gonna shut off my heat. So when I do this, I'm gonna just go one can at a time. And I shut my heat off because I don't want lumpiness. I want a nice smooth texture. So that's why I'm doing it with my heat off. Be careful when you're doing this. Remember, make sure that you wipe the tops of your lids so you're not getting any dust or dirt into your soup. And I have one more. So once it's stirred and a smooth consistency, then I'll increase the heat, okay? Because I want a nice smooth base. I don't want chunks. And I have a very small whisk, which is non-stick. Okay, so I'm just gonna try to get some of those lumps out with this first. Now this is going to appear a little bit lumpy because those lumps are also my onions that are in there. All right, that's nice and smooth. And that's what I'm going for. So now that it's smooth, rose. Okay. I'm going to increase the heat so it can come to a full thickening power. Now, we used flour. Could you make this gluten-free? Absolutely. So, flour has proteins that if you are allergic to wheat, you can get sick, okay? And if you wanted to make it gluten-free, instead of roux, you would use cornstarch as your thickener. So with that, you would start off with, let's say, maybe half a cup of cornstarch to maybe a cup of cold liquid, and you're going to make and stir that until it's thick, and that is called a slurry. Okay, so that looks about right. My potatoes are boiling. They need about 5 minutes or so, but I'm gonna stop it right here. And once these are done, then we will continue and finish our soup. All right? All right, so I'm gonna take a clean spoon and I'm going to taste one of my potatoes. Why? Because I wanna see if it is done. Now, the potato is about like 90% there, which is great because you don't want it to be fully cooked because you don't want your potatoes to disintegrate in the soup. So I strained it using a colander, okay? Why? Because I want to make sure my base of my soup is smooth before I add all of my lovely chunkies. So I'm going to keep my little pot holder there. And I am going to, again, I want this into a nice smooth consistency. And I'm going to grab a brand new whisk because my other one, well, kind of broke on me. And that happens. It's okay. So I'm going to just give this a stir. With the heat off. Because I want it smooth. All right. I have a nice smooth consistency. And you've noticed I haven't added any milk. Why? Because we're going to add the milk or the dairy at the end. All right, so that is okay. So basically what you have is a sauce. And we're gonna turn it into a soup by adding our cooked ingredients, okay? This has to come to a boil to get to its full thickening power. And you noticed I have not added any salt or pepper. And I'm only gonna do that at the end. Now, I'm not a big fan of black pepper in clam chowder, only because I don't like the flecks, the black little flecks, but I do like the spice. So what you could do is you could actually add some hot sauce if you wanted a little bit of heat without the black little flecks, okay? But if you like the black little flecks and it doesn't bother you, by all means, add black pepper, or you could also add white pepper. So I can feel the viscosity of the soup changing as I'm stirring. And you'll notice that when you make clam chowder, it might appear a little thin, but if you take your clam chowder and you cool it and refrigerate it and then reheat it to 165 like the following day, you'll notice that it'll thicken a little bit because those starch granules had more time to swell and absorb. Okay, and the thickness of clam chowder really is personal preference. I don't mind mine on the thin side. If you wanted a little thicker, you could add a little bit more roux to it, or in the beginning, or if you want thicker and it's already made, you can also go to adding a little bit of cornstarch if you want it a little bit thicker as well. All right, so it is slowly starting to come to a boil. So now I'm going to add my potatoes. And at the very last minute, I'm going to add my clams. I'm not going to cook the soup much longer after I add my clams, because I don't want the clams to get rubbery. So I'm actually going to shut my heat off. And the residual heat of the pot will continue to cook those clams. Okay. Now, I like greenage in my soup. So there's some options for that. You can add some parsley, which I have here. And guess what? We didn't add any cream so far. And I'm gonna add just a little bit. Again, the amount of cream that you put in does vary. Because it's a good consistency, I'm just gonna add about, I would say, maybe half a cup's worth. Okay. And that's really it. And it changes it a little bit. It gives it a little bit of a lighter color. If you added cream, it would add more of a luxurious texture. All right, but it's nice and kind of light and not too heavy. So to garnish it, I'm gonna add a little bit of parsley because I like a little bit of greenage in my soup. And I'm gonna add a little bit of chives. These happen to be from my garden. Okay, and I'm using a scissor to cut, not a knife. A little tip I learned from my sister-in-law, who's a hairdresser. Okay. Now, you could add oyster crackers. I just happen to have some Ritz crackers. All right. And then there you go. If you wanted to add a little bit more pepper or salt, and that is your clam chowder. Enjoy, everybody. Have a great